So anyway, I tried to get 2 guys to volunteer. And
Judge, your patient takes very by Mr. son.
I'm so glad to be well.
Yeah, that's...
I was so sick.
Okay, you were...
Okay, anyway, the captain called, said he wanted 2 volunteers. And he couldn't get anybody to volunteer. So this guy that I had controlling the water in the boiler was more knowledgeable than most of the others, so I finally said to him, "You're in charge. I'm going to go volunteer to go in a gun." Because I had learned how on the other ship, but it was a different kind of gun, but I figured I could learn it fast enough. So as I was going up the ladder to get out, this guy came down that was always the one that relieved me. And he used to like to come down and have coffee and whatever, so he was on his way down. And I said, "I need you to go with me." So where are we going? I said, "The captain wants us to go up to number 1 gun." So I said, he told me he needed 2 people. And so he said, "Okay, I'll go with you." So we went, and each engineering space, which was 4 of them on the ship, had been asked the same thing, to send 2. So we were manning the gun except for the 2 that were controlling the gun. And of course they were no more tired than we were because they didn't have to actually load the gun. So anyway, this one guy's asking us, have we ever done these different things and whatever? And I told him that on the other ship I was on, I was the first loader on a gun. And he said, "Well, you think you could put them things in there?" Well, they were 50 pounds each. And the other ship, there was like 8 pounds. Anyway, so I said, I'd try it. So anyway, I was to load these shells in, and the guy that went with me, he was going to put the powder cans in. And another guy that was a friend of mine on one of the other ships, he was going to open the cans, lids of the, when the powder cans came up from the magazine, they were in a casing. You have to open the thing and yank it. So he was going to open it and dump it in this guy's hand. And then on the other side, the magazine came up, and there was a guy at the head of the magazine, and he had a spinner wrench in his hand, and he would set the speed of the time for it to explode, and then hand it to me. And I had to turn around and get it and turn back and throw it in the gun. So the guy up on the thing that was aiming the gun said that they just said this is going to be rapid fire. So set the thing for 6 seconds. So that kind of scared me. How could I put, one in there every 6 seconds? But anyway, that's what we started doing. And of course, the captain knew what he was doing, and that was the only way he figured he could sink 4 ships, was to tear up the decks just as quick as he could so that he couldn't shoot back. So anyway, we apparently went in very close, and I started throwing these shells in this gun. And of course, it's already 120 degrees outside, and I had it sealed in this gun, so I don't know how hot it was or no. But anyway, I kept turning and throwing in guns in the shell, and as fast as I could turn, I was going like crazy. And after a while, I turned to get the shell, and I put it in my hand, and my back froze. I wouldn't turn. I'm standing and I figured, somebody's got to take, I can't move. Well, just right then, the ceasefire went off. And after they told me that I had put 200 shells in there in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
How heavy are they?
50 pounds each.
Wow.
Anyway, we sunk the 4 ships. And after they said that, the word came back that there was 10,000 troops on these ships, but only 2,000 of them had managed to reach Guadalcanal. So we killed all of them plus the crews.
Yeah.
And that, so anyway, after I got out of there, and a guy standing in front of the gun with a fire hose in his hand. So I said, what are you doing? He said, whoever was loading that gun, the barrel got red hot, and they had me shoot water on it. And that's why the paint is all coming off of the barrel. But he was nervous. So I went over to the side of the ship. By then, we got where the survivors were in the water. So anyway, I'm standing on the side of the ship trying to get a little breeze because I was soaking wet from sweat. And I'm just standing there, and the chief engineer come by. And it seemed like he was always anyway, he said, you're already soaking wet, so why don't you get back in there and pull a couple more guys in? I said, I haven't been in there. And he said, where you been? I said, I've loaded that gun. He said, no, you didn't. You was assigned to the ballroom. So I figured, I'm not going to tell you again, but the captain told me. So I just kept my mouth shut and put the rope on and jumped in the ocean. And I pulled two guys in, and I went to get the third one. And I said to the poor guy, you're going to have to help me. I said, I'll do my best, but you just hang on and we'll get back to the ship, because we weren't very far anyway. And we got on, and I got him up there, and I went on too, and I figured, if that guy comes back and says anything, I'm going to throw him in there. But anyway, we ended up picking up these survivors, and we picked up 289 men. And here come our buddy, flying over. Today he's not going to bomb us. He comes down strafing. And everybody's fooling around with these poor survivors. So he starts splattering the deck with his strafing the deck. So he ended up killing 3 of the people who was just pulled in. But we didn't shoot him down. They didn't even shoot at him because nobody was in the guns, especially me. So anyway, but he strafed the ship. But he didn't come back. So after we picked up all those, we were supposed to go where the Juno was sunk and try to pick them up. And I don't know how history will report it, but they all got eaten by the sharks. So the ones that got off, because they were right in the middle, and them sharks were just, when we got there, just jumping all over the place. We didn't find nobody, not a soul over the Juno. And all them 5 brothers got killed.
Yeah, that was ironic that you saw them.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, after that, the Meade ought to get all kinds of history things. They were ordered, after that battle, we had a cruiser that the bow was shot off. So it wasn't able to continue with the other ships. So they wanted to send it to Australia, and the only way it could go was backwards to keep it from sinking. They'd closed all the bulkheads, but they were afraid they'd bust. So it was going to go from Guadalcanal to Sydney, Australia backwards, and we had to escort it there. So we did, and that was nice. We got to go ashore and have a good time there in Australia. But then we were ordered from there to Pearl Harbor. So we got to Pearl Harbor, and we all had to go to the hospital for an examination. So when we got there, we were told that our examination was to see if we could go from 120 degree heat to below freezing. And all of us passed except one guy. And so after we left there, we were told that the Japs had invaded Altu and Kiska and part of Alaska itself, near Gold Bay, Alaska. And we were to go up there and take it back. So we did. We went. We went from boiling to freezing.
Wow.
And of course we were told once we got up in that area, because we left in April. I think it was when we finished with Australia. No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was in the early part of the year. I think we got to Pearl Harbor in January, and then we went to Alaska from there.
And this is
43. And so we went up there, and after we got there, man, it was cold. We were told, don't worry about life jackets or anything else. If we get sunk, you got 30 seconds to live.
Right, yeah.
So anyway, we took one Marine. Now you talked about the Marines. We had one Marine, and we were going to scoot in there and land him in Alaska. And he was going to have a radio, and he was near where the headquarters of the Japs were, was on near Cold Bay, Alaska, somewhere up there. And he was going to go ashore and tell us where the headquarters were so we could blast them. But they just sent in, that's all. and he told us.
It's a lonely life.
Yeah, he told us where to shoot. So that was our first thing, that was to blow up the Japanese headquarters that was on the main Alaska. And after we did that, of course, they brought in the troops to land, and we had to go shell I-2 and Kiska. And we had a rough time with I-2. It was a man. It was rough. And Japs sent planes that couldn't go back home. They didn't have gas, but they came, and we shot them all down. And if we hadn't, they couldn't have done anything. I mean, if they couldn't shoot, drop pump bomb, they were going to have to go dive in the ocean somewhere because they couldn't have gas to go home. But we ended up shooting them all down anyhow because they were because slow bombers. And we had 2 hours of daylight, and that's when they'd come. Shoot them down. It was a mess. But anyway, after I-2, we had the time with that. They went to Kiska, and they had somehow got them all off. They went nowhere. And they said that they must have been sitting down to eat because the food was still on the table, and they had left, but we didn't have.
We never found them.
No, we didn't find them. I don't know how they got away, but anyway, another thing happened to us up there. They said that the Japs were sending in 4 or 5 ships, and they was going to come in through the Bering Straits, where it's only a mile between Russia and Alaska. So we were sent to intercept them. And we got up in there, and I thought the ship was going to sink. And man, it was a mess. So finally, the captain just turned around, I guess, and got out of there. And after we got out, they found out that the main beam in the forward part of the ship is cracked. So I guess if we had stayed the whole bow would have blown off or something. But anyway, after that was over, and we had taken I-2 and Kiska back, and Cold Bay, Alaska was ours, we were ordered to New Zealand. And we stopped in Bremerton, Washington, to get the beam fixed. So they fixed the beam, and we went straight to New Zealand. And they was trying to load the 1st Marine Division, and if you listen to anything about the war at all, the 1st Marine Division was the ones that had all the trouble with Guadalcanal. They were the first ones to invade there and stayed till the army could come, and they had a lot of problems. But anyway, they wanted done. The 1st Marine, they'd been in Wellington, New Zealand to recuperate. They were going to send them to the Gilbert Islands to invade Tarawa and Macon and Kwajalein and all that stuff. So our job was to go with them and to invade that, and they wouldn't leave. They wouldn't want to go. They was hiding all over the place. So we got picked to be shore patrolmen to go round up the Marines. Can you believe that?
No. I do believe it.
It was a mess trying to, and I wasn't about to hit anyone with a stick or anything because they had a club and a gun, But we were told where to go, and they were there. And some of them ran, but some of them went with us. So I guess we finally ended up with enough put them on the ship, and away we went. And we were assigned to Tarawa as the ship's support, and we went in there, and in November 1943, no, that was a different story. But anyway, we went in there, and the submarines were supposedly thereabouts, so we picked up a submarine on our radars, or sonar, and started shooting it, or dropping depth charges. Well, we ended up blowing it out of the water, so it came up. So there's another destroyer there that had been equipped with a knife in the front to ram submarines. So the captain on my ship wanted to capture the submarine. He didn't want, once it come up, he wanted to just capture it. Well, this other ship come flying in there because they wanted to try out that new knife they had. So they come flying in there and they hit the side of that submarine, and 4 Japs blew up out of the hole, and we put our whaleboat in the water to go pick them up, and that captain must have been ready to shoot that. I mean, he was so mad, the guy was telling me, because he wanted to capture the whole crew and the whole thing, and that thing hit it and sunk it. So anyway, our whaleboat was in the water, pick up 4 Japs, and a carrier that was off the coast somewhere got word that there's a submarine been blown out of the water, and they wanted to sink it. So they sent this ship in, this plane in, come flying in, and the submarine's already gone. The only thing in the water is our whaleboat with 4 Japs and 3 of our crewmen. And this plane comes diving in and drops a 500-pound bomb in the water, and this is the whaleboat, but the whaleboat went up in the water, and everybody went in the water. All the Japs and the 3 crew. And so the captain says, shoot it down. So they start shooting at the plane, and of course the plane, he took off. He knew he made a mistake. And he left, they didn't shoot him down. But the other guys had to jump in the water and round up these 4 Japs. And they got them back in the whaleboat and saved the other whaleboat, and we got them on our ship, and so nobody really got hurt. But one of the Japs had his leg almost cut off. I don't know how it happened, whether it was a depth charge or what, but his leg was kind of dangling, and of course they didn't have any way to put him to sleep. They just give him morphine, which all of us carried morphine, and if we got shot, we were supposed to stick it in us, and they held him down and gave him morphine and took his leg off up above the knee.
Oh my gosh. We're going to end this tape in about 5 minutes. So what we can do is you can show us the pictures that you have, and we can rewind and put in the second tape, and you can keep on keeping on.
Okay. This is my last ship, the one that I went to Tokyo on. That's the Bennington, that's the engineering department.
Seems like the ship my uncle was on the Bennington. That rings a bell. Somebody we've interviewed has been on the Bennington.
That's the Meade and the history of the Meade.
Did the Bennington serve in several other wars?
Served when?
In several other wars.
Oh yeah, it went all the way through Vietnam.
My uncle was on that ship.
Huh?
My uncle was on that
Oh,
ship.
yeah?
I thought Robert Buckner, I don't...
No, I only was there during the war, but I commissioned that ship. And I had a girlfriend and a brother and a sister-in-law that came for the commissioning on the Bennington, and we had our spot, and I was supposed to stand with them at the last minute. They said, you're the only one that we know can keep the boiler without making smoke. So I had to spend the commissioning down in the boiler room not making smoke.
Thank you for those. Now, where are we now in time? It's 1940.
Where we ended up at July was 1943.
Okay. So, you want to stop and then we'll get another tape.
Oh boy. And I wanted to get to go back to Flyby College, we called it.
And it's 1943.
1943.
So if you'll take us from 1943 to the end of the war.
No, it was the end of 1943.
Okay, so we're going into 1944.
Yes, we're going in.
Okay.
By the time I got to Philadelphia, it was 1944.
Okay, this is a good way to begin then. It is now 1944.
1944.
Okay.
Yes, and I reported into Philadelphia, and we were assigned, and all of the people there were either second-class water tenders or third-class water tenders. The whole school was for us. So we were told from the very beginning that when we finished, if we were in the top 10% of the class, they would have a list of ships, and we could select the one that we thought we would like to serve on. If we were the other, we'd be assigned to a ship, probably a DE or a destroyer. Well, when we finished school, I was in the top 10%, but I didn't plan to pick a ship because I had spent my time on two destroyers, and I didn't really care about going anywhere else. I wanted to go on a destroyer. So we got in line, and these two fellows that I had met in the class wanted to go on the Bennington, because it was a ship you could pick if you was...
Is this your fourth ship or third ship?
Third ship.
Third ship.
The Bennington. So if you were in the top 10%, you could select any ship that was on the list. And the Bennington, they had examined ours, because they didn't want to go back on the destroyer, but one of them was on the sister ship to the Juno, and he didn't want to go back on that ship either, the right kind of ship. So anyway, they had decided they were going to pick the Bennington. But since we were in the class together and always sat together and were friends, they spent the whole time we were in line convincing me that I could have regular food and ice cream and all this fancy stuff if I would sign up for the Bennington that really had all this stuff. So by the time we got to the end of the line, I said, okay. So I signed to go on the Bennington. So I was sent to the Bennington from the school. I don't remember the exact month, but it must have been March. It was early part of March. I had finished the school, and I went on the Bennington. And the Bennington was still being built. It was because they weren't really ready for us, but anyway, we had finished school, so we went. And so we really were there to see it put together. And I was assigned the job of drawing all the oil, hydraulic oil, and water lines as they went in, because they were just putting them in when we got there. So I drew all of them, so I'd know where all the valves were, and I'd known all the numbers of the valves all right through the whole ship. And we finally got everything together and got ready to commission it on August the 6th, 1944. So we made our trial runs, and then we all come out to Cuba. Anyway, and then we went to Trinidad, and then we went to Jamaica, and then we came back to New York and loaded in all the planes and headed for the Pacific. And we went straight to Tokyo. And our first thing was, we were the first ships to go off the coast of Japan to bomb Tokyo after Jimmy Doolittle had done it back in 42. So this is 2 years later. So we were assigned to do that. So we started running up and down the coast of Japan. We'd go up to Kaiyoshi where it was freezing, and then the next day we were back at Yokosuka where it was hot and whatever, and we running back and forth. And then they decided to invade Okinawa. So we were support aircraft, and it was a different kind of experience for me, because I was before in a little destroyer. We were in the invasion of Okinawa, and then we went to Iwo Jima, and after that our next thing was we just continued bombing Japan, and then we were 200 miles off the coast of Japan, and we got orders to proceed away as fast as we could go, and because something big was going to happen. So we did that, and what it was, they dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima that morning, and then we stayed away because 2 days later they dropped another one, and of course that ended the war. And after that we went into Tokyo. When Missouri was in there, we went in with Missouri for the surrender ceremonies, and any aerial photographs you ever see of that were made by the pilots off the Bennington. They took all the, where they went down and you could see them like from the air, sitting there and whatever. And so they took all those pictures. And then we stayed out there after that happened for several months, still patrolling around and trying to round up Japs in the Philippines. Oh, I forgot to tell you, we went to Leyte when MacArthur came back, and we went to support that too, but you kind of, if you're not involved, you don't really remember. I was always so far away and down in the border, and I didn't know much was happening. But we were in that, and then, but after that, we ended up coming back to Norfolk, Virginia, and we got back there in 1946. Yeah, got back in, I think, April of 46, and I got married in May 46. But anyway, I stayed on the Bennington, and I was in charge of the crew to decommission my fire room. And we had 90 days to accomplish that. And I was able to do my part in 45 days. And my crew, we got ours finished. And I was offered if I would extend for 18 months past my enlistment, which was going to end in June of 47, if I would agree to 18-month enlistment, I would be promoted to Chief Petty Officer and left to take care of all the engineering spaces after decommissioned for that time. So I thought that was a very good thing. And I felt pretty good, and I agreed to do that. And then I went home and talked to Dolores, and she just had a fit. She was, I mean, we hadn't been married for 2 years, but she said there's a caste system in the Navy, and I was no part of it.
The war is over, so the Navy's over. So
yeah. So anyway, I had to go back and tell them, we all want to withdraw at 18 months. So they said, this lieutenant commander that I had to go to, I could tell he was just ready to blow his top because he knew he had somebody sleeping up there at ship. But anyway, I didn't do it, so he said to me, well, you have less than a year, so we're not allowed to send you back to sea, but I wish I could. So he said, well, what we're going to do, we're not going to let you stay here either. We're going to send you to Florida to decommission APDs on the St. Johns River.
All right, this is interesting, to have all this equipment failure. You kind of give some of the things in the Navy.
It's good that we can get it going.
Okay, so you were going to have to go to Florida and decommission ships in your final days in the Navy.
Yes.
Okay.
So I went to Florida and found an apartment in St. Augustine, and that was the first time I ever ran into people not wanting anything to do with service people. A nice place, right across from the cemetery in St. Augustine. So, and then I was able to get a ride every day with this chief petty officer that had a car, and every morning he would pick me up and take me, and we'd go out on the ship, and they had ships that were making the power so we could decommission the other ships. There was an awful lot of ships there, and the first ship I went on was called the APD Loy, APD 56 Loy. So they had a crew that would make the power, but I was in charge of the decommissioning crews because I did pretty good on the thing, so that was my job. And we went on there and we were given 60 days to decommission each ship. So I used a lot of the things that I had come up with in decommissioning the Bennington and set it up down there. And we finally got so we could knock one of them things out in 21 days. And that's the only recognition I ever got. And the captain came over one day and congratulated us. And I thought, well, that was pretty good. So anyway, I stayed there. And since I had only had 20 days leave in my time in the Navy, you're supposed to be allowed 30 days a year, but they said they couldn't give me all those days, but they would give me 60 days. So I could leave the Navy 60 days early, but it would show that I was discharged on June 18th, because I would still be considered in the Navy just on leave. So that's what I did after, but for 3 months before I got out, every morning, because the Navy's kind of something else, but anyway, I had to go be lectured to about staying in the service. They need people like you. They got to come every morning. And so I had to go. I never did tell Dolores. But every morning for 3 months, I had to get everybody started, and at 9 o'clock I had to go sit down and listen to the good things that were going to happen to me in the Navy.
Even though you knew you weren't.
I knew I wasn't, but I went. I went, and I listened. And it was nice. I really wanted to stay so bad. But anyway, I didn't.
Yeah.
So I got discharged.
Well, I know the Navy must have been very important to you because this has been the easiest interview I've ever done in my life. It's been wonderful. I mean, you were in before the war, through the war, and told us about after the war when you were decommissioning. And like I said, I asked you one question.
Yeah.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
You know,
And if everybody was easy to interview you, I would be This would be a very easy job. I've enjoyed it, I know.
You know what I did right after the war?
What?
You know, Korean War started right after I got out.
Bob was in the Korean
Yeah.
War.
And when my younger brother, was in the Navy for the last couple of years, and he was in the reserves, because you couldn't be in the regular Navy after 43 or something, you had to be in the reserve. So he got called back. And he had to report to Philadelphia, and so he stayed weekends with us. But anyway, during that time, this person came to my house and wanted to know if I planned to go back in the Navy. And I said no, I hadn't thought of it, but I didn't think I would. And I knew I'd have a battle if I even mentioned it. So anyway, he said, well, you know, the radar around the United States will not go down 200 feet from the ground. There's a 200-foot space. And now that they have these low-flying planes and things, we're going to try to put a ring around the country to protect that spot, you know, to control that. And he said, I really don't know if you're qualified to do that, but you're the only one in this whole area that I found that passes security. So he said, would you like to try? So I had a job in a power plant. I was working I think the second shift. I've been put on maybe the first shift, but I was I've been put on the first shift in this power plant. But anyway, he said, we'd like to offer that to you. And I said, well, I don't know, I'm doing pretty good where I am, and I like what I'm doing. He said, well, this is basically the same thing that you're going to be doing. We're just going to set up these bases. And so I said, well, let me think about it. He said, I'm going to give you 15 minutes. And I said, for what? What's going to happen if I don't? He said, you're going to get called back in the Navy because your rating is very important for this game. So he said, we're going to put you in the Navy. So I said, I'll do that job. So I did. I put that thing around the country.
Well, thank you.
I'll be darned.
I didn't help it.
I mean, I didn't do the radar. I did the engineering, the boilers and the power plants and the air conditioning, all of that to make it happen. And the only place that was in Twin Lights. You live in New Jersey. You know where Twin Lights is?
No.
Oh, that's the highest point on the Jersey coast. It's in Highlands, where the mob man lived.
Oh, right.
Yeah, whatever his name. I met him one time in a church.
That's right across from New York City.
Yeah, right across, yeah. And they had those big lights, you know.
Lighthouses?
Lighthouses. There are two twin lighthouses on this high peak in New Jersey, Atlantic Highlands. And they put this base there, and it was run by the Air Force. So I was in charge of all the engineering on this thing, and some of the things I had to learn that I really didn't know, but nobody bothered me. I had a major from the civilian corps, whatever you call that handles all the dams and things around the rivers and things. Corps of Engineering. Corps of Engineering, yeah. A major, I mean, he'd like to be called major, but he was a civilian. But he had been a major, so he liked to be called. So he was supposed to be my boss out of Long Island, New York. He was stationed somewhere there. And the general at that time was called Rosie or something. Rosie, is that who you know?
Air Force now?
Yeah, General Rosie O'Donnell or something?
Yes, you're close.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It won't come to me either, but you're close.
Yeah, but these people called him Rosie, the people that I dealt with. Anyway, he was in charge of all this thing. And we put up these buildings and the boilers, and I did all that, but I didn't fool with the radar thing, but we had this squadron, AW something squadron, that flew above that at that time, when we first opened it up. And they let me go in, because they had this big secret room, but since I told them I had security clearance, I got to go in there, and I could listen to those pilots, and these people, as they would talk and tell about things coming in and whatever, and I thought, gee, that's pretty good. But what I did, after we got this base running, they started building them all around the country. And this, where I was the only one manned by civilians, and all the rest was manned by Air Force people. So they would send a crew in, and I would teach them how to operate these things, because theirs was going to be identical, only smaller than the one where I was. So they would send a crew in for 6 weeks, and I would take them to the classroom part of the time, and the other part I would show them how to fire boilers or run generators and everything, and do all that. So I stayed there, and I was very unhappy, and I should not have been, but I couldn't put up with civilian people working for the government. They don't work. They don't, they wasn't my kind of people, and I couldn't take it. So when we finished, it wasn't all the way around the country, but we got just one in California, but we got all the way that went on the East Coast and went on to California. So I went to the guy and I said, I gotta quit. I said, I'm having to spend more time chasing these civilians, trying to get them to do these things, and I'm tired of doing everything myself because I can't ever find them. And so he said, well, what does this on? I said, I couldn't find them after lunch today, and I finally found them way over behind the barracks with golf clubs putting. And I said, I don't belong here. I got to go back. So I left. But we did get that thing going.
I'll be doing.
Well, thank you for telling us about that too.
That was nice.
I'm so glad we got to do this interview, and I thank you very much for your time and your trouble, and you're coming back a second time, of course.
Yeah, okay.
Equipment
That's okay. Yeah.
We're civilians, we don't know how to run the equipment, so.
Okay, yeah.
So it's been our pleasure,
Thank you.
and I appreciate, and you have a fantastic memory. Thank you very,
Okay.
very much.
Okay, did I get another
You
tape?
do,
Okay.
but you